White fluffy clouds slowly float across the blue sky. The sun peeks out from behind the high mountains, shrouded in greenery, illuminating the lonely rocks. It also continued to scorch people working hard in the golden field, trying for the benefit of the whole village. The main character straightened up, stretching his back. With his hand he rubbed his forehead wet from the heat. The ears completely hid his body, wrapped in seemingly warm clothes, black and blue, leaving only a dark shock of hair in sight. The guy blissfully exhales. I am glad that he has finally finished his work. After just a couple of minutes, an old man approaches him. His hair was gray, and so was his beard, and on his body was the most ordinary peasant clothes. Finally approaching the young guy, he sincerely praises him for a job well done. The brunette looks at the old man, smiling at his words, to which the gray-haired man hands the young guy a bag that was hanging on his belt a couple of minutes ago. There was clearly local currency inside, which he was going to give to the assistant as a sign of gratitude for the work done. The old man says that they will do the rest themselves, but the brunette politely refuses the reward, saying that he cannot accept this money. He actively continues to wave his hands, making it clear that he will not take them. From such unexpected actions, an elderly man is lost, opening his eyes and pulling a bag of money to his chest. A moment later, the guy straightens up, proudly proclaiming his motto, do good without expecting a reward. Self-confidence plays on his face. Because of these words, local residents, also working in the field, begin to turn around, distracted from work, at the assistant, wondering at his unselfishness. Tears of joy appear in the old man's eyes. He pulls one hand to his chest, in the area of the heart, showing all his gratitude to the brunette, and he pulls the other to his face, wiping away tears. He says that the brunette is a nice young man, and that there are no such people left. And then he finishes his speech, saying that the guy will always be remembered in the village of windmills. A notification pops up in front of the hero stating that relations with the residents of the village of windmills have improved, and the player's reputation has increased by 1 point. At the same moment, the main character begins to rejoice inside himself, rejoicing that he has become one step closer to the goal. Although he didn't show it with his face, the only thing he showed was his slight smile. A week has passed since the launch of the game Gods of Chaos, and only on the first day, 1 billion players registered in the game. There was absolute freedom in the game. The players had cities at their disposal. They could create completely different heroes, whatever their sole desire. The game had realistic monsters, different levels of difficulty, so that the game process was interesting. And, of course, realistic actions that attracted new users so much. Very quickly, the game became the most popular in the world. One of the main advantages of the game is that you can choose one of the many professions, which was not a small list. The brunette is now at the first level, and he did not have a profession. His reputation showed the number 9, and his nickname was Wildfire. The hero dreamed of becoming a holy knight, so he thought about how he could earn another point, which he lacked for this title. Once again, he was indignant, cursing the man who came up with the idea that 10 reputation points were needed to change the profession. After all, for the sake of this, he has to constantly refuse rewards for quests. But now he has almost reached his goal. The same bright sun cheerfully illuminated the forest through which the main character was walking. It was quiet and peaceful around. Only the leaves sometimes made a soft noise because of the breeze playing with them. A man was sitting by one of the trees, whose face was not visible because of the hood. Next to him was a wooden cane, which also rests on a tree. There is a soft cough from a stranger, which was used to attract attention. From under the hood you can see a hooked nose, thin lips and sparse teeth, as well as a gray beard. The man suddenly rises from his seat, leaning on a cane, humping, stretches out his hand forward, asking for help. At the same moment, a brunette is walking next to him, and as soon as he hears pleas for help, he immediately hurries to the stranger to help him. The guy clasps someone else's hands with his own, and stars sparkle in his eyes. He turns to the old man, asking if he needs help. From this, the gray-haired man is slightly lost, trembles, but agrees, but expresses his fears that the brunette may disagree. He proudly raises his head, showing an even row of teeth. He answers that you can rely on him, that he is ready to perform any task. In his head, he kept the idea that the mall house belongs to the zone for beginners. So any quest there was quite simple, and accordingly nothing threatened his life. The old man's shaking hand holds out a perfectly ordinary-looking ring. The man asks, seemingly about a trifle, just to deliver the decoration to the city. The brunette is surprised, because the city was close enough, and even an old man could walk on his own. But he bends down to someone else's hand, carefully examining the ring. Suddenly, the old man confidently tells the guy to catch the ring, after which he throws it at the brunette. The guy gets lost, barely manages to grab the jewelry, but almost falls himself because of this commotion. But, it turns out, the ring did not fall into his hand, but it easily slipped on his finger, comfortably fit on the index finger. An unexpected bright light thickens around the guy. The old clothes are instantly torn off, and a new one comes in their place. A long black cloak, which ended at the end with a red fire pattern, turns out to be on the young man. A glove appears on the right hand, and a brooch in the form of a skull flaunts on the chest, which had a scar on the right eye, and a sword was stuck in the head. There was a circle around in which all this was enclosed, and in the end, under the skull, a red ribbon. The brunette is surprised by the unexpected change in his appearance, but he can't utter a word, only examines himself from head to toe. A second later, a new notification pops up in front of him, telling him that the guy got a new profession, called Tyrant. At the same moment, an unknown man quickly starts running away, and the brunette looks at the notification window in confusion, then at the old man running away. The guy reveals all the information about himself in the game. Fortunately, his nickname and level remain the same. Only his profession and reputation were completely different. His reputation dropped to -100, and his profession was now Tyrant. The brunette screams, being in shock, asking himself what kind of tyrant. His face completely resembles the painting Scream. Not believing in everything that is happening, he continues to ask, as if from the system, why his hard-earned 9 reputation points have turned into -100. The old man coughs into his fist again, attracting the young man's attention. Having completely removed the hood, he finally lets himself be seen. Long gray hair and the same color beard, brown faded eyes, and the same hooked nose that attracted attention. Smiling contentedly, the man explains the situation to the guy. As it turned out, now that his profession has changed, he has joined the ranks of the same old man. And now the brunette is a tyrant. At the same moment, emotions disappear from the guy's face, and the soul seems to leave the body. But the old man encouragingly shoves the hero in the side, and says that if the guy wants to say something, he can say it to him. Coming to himself, the brunette begins to get angry. It's like a fire is burning around him. He starts yelling at the old man, calling him an old goat, after which he asks the question that torments him at this very moment. Because he did nothing to him, why did the old man do this to him? The brunette continued to say that the man came and arranged such dances with dressing up. Everything was burning inside the guy. He couldn't calm himself down. But the old man does not react to all this anger in any way. He spreads his arms to the sides, covering one eye. Not a muscle of his face twitched, and he only said with a bit of mockery that the boy could now do whatever he wanted. And then he wonders why the guy is so angry. But he is interrupted, because the brunette grabs the old man by the collar, lifting him a little above the ground. The guy is ready to cry from despair. He complains that he had to complete quests to become a holy knight, but now everything is useless. The old man does not react to this in any way, only pretends that the guy is hard to hear, because he cleans his ear with his little finger. After that, the old man's bony hand lay on the guy's hands, which continued to hold the man above the ground. He tells the guy that he gave him a chance, that the brunette still has no idea how powerful tyrants are. And then he adds that not even everyone likes knights. The hero lets go of the man and recoils from him. He was still in a state of confusion, but still asked the old man if it was true. To this, the gray-haired man nods, answering that he is telling the pure truth. And then he warns that from now on he is their student, and that he will treat him well. Suddenly, the guy seems to have an idea, and he asks to wait until he gathers his thoughts together. Then he asks if it's bad that his reputation has fallen from 9 to -100. In response, the old man confirms his assumptions. There is no need to be a great person to understand that this is bad for good citizens. And then he adds that now he will be limited in some aspects, so the old man hopes that luck will be on the guy's side. The first thought that comes to the head of the brunette is that it's worth deleting your account and starting the game again. But he is distracted from these thoughts again by a man who says that he will not allow something bad to happen. And then he asks the brunette to pay attention to what he can do now. With a wave of his hand, the man's body was enveloped in fire, which he was absolutely not afraid of, as if they were friends. After the fiery flash moved away from the man and ended up near the guy, the fire swirled into a kind of funnel, from which the brunette could not take his eyes off. But immediately the guy panicked, starting to inspect the area, noticing how to put out the fire. Not finding anything nearby, he starts trampling the flame with his foot, stopping it. And the brunette himself asks what kind of business it is. Out of desperation, the guy grumbles to himself that he has been playing for a long time, and all the progress is for nothing. After that, the brunette decides to check what kind of profession this is. After all, he himself had never heard of such a thing. The hero opens the system by finding a section called Tyrant, but at the same moment it is lost, because there was no information in principle. The guy turns around, leaving the old man, and walks along the path back towards the city, assuming that he was fooled. He hoped that by returning to the city, he would be able to fix something. The city spread out before him, which was shrouded in the warm rays of the sun. The brunette was standing on a rock, looking around. Then he wandered to the gate, but he didn't have time to get close to them, because there were knights patrolling the territory on top of the tower. They did not take their eyes off the brunette. Because of this, the guy was surprised, asking himself what was going on. His next assumption was that a war had begun, or maybe a new event. The fact is that in the Gods of Chaos from time to time there are military actions where players can earn a lot of reputation points for their achievements. Knowing all this, the brunette immediately lit up with a new plan. After all, there is a chance that he will be able to return at minus 100 reputation points in such an event. Inside, the hope lit up that the guy would be able to get back on the path he had originally chosen. The brunette begins to wave, trying to draw the knight's attention to himself. He shouts, asking to open the gate for him. He walks with a confident step towards the fortress, but to his surprise, he is not greeted with open arms. One of the knights shouts back so that the young man can hear, orders the guy in front to stop moving or they will open fire. The brunette gets lost, looking around, trying to notice another person who may be walking ahead. But after he realizes that the knights are talking about the guy himself, he even asks a little confused if it's about him. The hero puts his hand on his heart, and with a smile says that he is not a bad guy, but the feeling of anxiety inside did not let him go. What is the probability that they will believe him so easily? Slowly begins to wander to the entrance, continues to look at the patrolmen, watching their reaction. But the knights are only interested in the brooch on the cloak, which they noticed from the very beginning, the one in the form of a skull. The commander-in-chief takes off from his seat, clinging to his sword with his hand, pulling it out of the scabbard. His eyes are burning with rage, because knights cannot put the inhabitants in danger. Shouts to the others that the tyrant is approaching, calls on everyone to attack. He gives the order to kill him, and in the first ranks aim with the rest of the knights at the young man. The brunette gets scared and starts running away, cursing the old man, because now he can't return to the city. But his eyes come across a ring on his finger, which begins to glow with a faint blue color. A notification pops up in front of his face, offering to activate the villain skill. The hero arrives confused, wondering what it is, but the stone under his feet brings him out of his thoughts, about which he safely stumbled and flew to the ground. He manages to turn over in the air, and eventually finds himself sitting on the grass. He doesn't have time to understand what just happened. While he was recovering, the knights managed to surround him from all sides, cutting off his escape routes. Finding himself in such a predicament, the guy accepts the idea that he will delete the account after all and start all over again. He holds his hand for a moment near the notification that suggested using the villain skill, and decides to try one last time. For the sake of interest, what kind of ability is this? He agrees to accept it by pressing the right button. A jet of flame leaps out of his ring on his finger, which flies straight towards the knight who attacked him with a sword. The same knight orders the tyrant to go to hell, but the eyes that glistened red are looking around, understanding the situation of affairs. The hand automatically reaches for the sword, and on the machine, the brunette deals damage to the knight. Then he swings at the next one, and then at the others. One by one, he defeats the people who are against him. At the same time, the brunette does not make any effort. All this happened as if someone or something was controlling his body. Stopping for a split second, the guy is surprised that he really hit all the targets, even though he was only on the first level. New notifications appeared one after another. The first one said that the brunette attacked the guards of the malt house. Then he was notified that his relationship with the city had changed, and now they are hostile. In the third notification it was written that the guy was no longer expected in the malt house, and now he has a bounty of 10 gold coins. Well, in the latter, they announced that the reputation had changed by another minus 10. The current reputation value was minus 110. The brunette was in shock from such rapidly changing windows in front of his face. Remaining still in the center, surrounded by guards, he begins to justify that he did not want to do this, begged for mercy, but the guards were adamant. One of them ordered the others to kill him. The guy, as if under the influence of an unprecedented force, begins to attack in response, not giving himself offense, but along the way he managed to apologize to every person he hurt. But the knights don't give up. They start using magic, such as Blade Flight, Electric Dragon Strike, Great Sword Strike. The brunette's ardor subsides slightly. He is already sure that this is his end, but his whole body continues to move by itself, and he instantly copes with all the attackers on him. He is surprised that he was not hurt at all by the blows from the guards. Therefore, he gathers courage and confidently attacks first, shouting that it was his turn to attack. Defeating each opponent, he still does not forget to apologize to them. And now he turns out to be one of those who could still stand on their feet. Around him were exhausted guards who simply did not believe in their defeat. The guy reopens the panel where there was information about skills. He begins to look for what this skill, which has just manifested itself, is needed for. The villain skill increases all attributes depending on reputation. The lower the reputation, the higher the new bonus. The guy even somehow exhaled with relief after he learned this information. After all, I thought that if he did not win, he would be imprisoned. After that, he realizes that he is not so unlucky. At the same moment, he puts his sword back into its scabbard. He realizes that he has escaped, but most likely he will never return to the malt house. And again, the game presents advice. It says that a player killed by an NPC guard goes to jail for 48 hours, and to be released, the account must be online within 48 hours. The brunette suggests that he can try his luck in the City of Chaos, and then the thought comes to him that something valuable may remain on the guards, so he moves towards them. But it turns out that there was a solid pile of metal, so he leaves the city. After some time on the battlefield, after the battle, new people appear who talk about some kind of devil who created all this. After all, the very devil completely freed people from their equipment, putting them in a separate pile. A man with long black hair says that, unfortunately, they were late and could not help their own. One of the guards approaches the captain and says that he has heard that this is all the work of one adventurer, but he is surprised by the power, and asks if there are even such adventurers with such power. In fact, the man in a rage shouts out to pass his order for the capture of Wildfire, and the reward for it will be 200 gold. It didn't matter to him whether he was alive or dead, because he wanted the brunette to know that the laws of the malt house should not be underestimated. The brunette could never imagine in his life that they could assign a reward for him, so also in 200 gold coins, which was not a small amount. He thought about this when a new notification popped up in front of his face, in which it was said that for the capture of Wildfire the hero would be awarded 200 gold. And most importantly, it did not matter whether he should be alive or dead, so stronger opponents could not think about restraining their strength in order to leave the guys alive. Only a week has passed since the launch of the game, so the brunette believed that there would still be no reward for the seeker in the city. He wanted to become a holy knight and be a man of honor, but now he's just an exile with no reputation. All these thoughts visited his head again and again as he trudged through the rocky, green terrain. The only thing that comforted him was his new skill. This skill was a villain, and now he was in cooldown. And the time to restore this skill was given 2,400 seconds. A thought flashed through the guy's head, which voiced all his dissatisfaction, because the skill works for 1 minute, and then wait for an hour when it can be used a second time. But from thinking about a new skill, he was sometimes distracted by a grumbling stomach, reminding him of hunger. The brunette was holding his stomach, feeling an unpleasant feeling. How hungry he was, and his strength was already running out. Walking became difficult. He was surprised that even in such aspects the game was so realistic. There was no limit to the guy's joy when he finally notices a man who was walking slowly across the field, not far from the village. The brunette draws attention to himself, and he twitches in surprise. The thought comes to mind that there is a village ahead, which means there should be food and water. The hero raises his hand up and turns to the guy, asking permission to ask something. But for a sweet smile, which was originally supposed to be endearing, the stranger only breaks away from his place, hurrying to the village. Along the way, he shouts, notifying residents that there is a tyrant in the village. This immediately throws the young man into shock. He thinks that the first thing to do is to restore his reputation, but there are doubts whether he has any chances at all. Having gone a little deeper into the city, he is surrounded by people threatening him with pitchforks and other accessories that they managed to grab, hurriedly leaving the house. They continued to curse him, calling him a tyrant, shouting not to approach them. There was the most genuine fear in their eyes. The guy could not even imagine how to react to all this. So he just raises his hands up, as if giving up, showing that he should not be afraid. He still decides to use the attempt to justify himself. He scratches the back of his head and says that people misunderstood everything. But would anyone believe it so easily? As soon as the brunette took a step towards the people, all the residents immediately began to run away from him in all directions. In an instant it became so quiet that it seemed that a tumbleweed was about to appear here. And the boy just stood in disbelief, scratching his head. He didn't want to become a tyrant. Why is everyone reacting like this? The brunette was also tormented by the question of how the others realized that he was a tyrant. His gaze dropped to the brooch that fit perfectly on his raincoat. His eyes drooped. Apparently, it was all because of the badge that gave him away. From thoughts about his new profession, his stomach again distracts, discontentedly asking for at least something to eat. Realizing that the guy no longer has the strength to endure because of realistic hunger, he trudges through the village, intending to get food, although he understood that he generally has no money. And after that, it will be possible to proceed with the question of what to do next. Passing by another house, he notices sausages on the porch. He immediately rejoices in the food he could find. He already has time to imagine the taste of food, which he is about to enjoy. But a dialogue with himself pops up in my head. Does he have the right to take some, because the villagers have fled? But conscience fades into the background after another stomach complaint, so the brunette just pounces on the meat product, starting to devour it greedily. First he needs to eat, because he may die of hunger, which clearly could not be allowed in the first place. He had a stomach, and then his conscience. Having already entered the house, he takes more sausages, continuing to chew them. And again before him is the same notice, which said that he stole bread from the village of windmills, and his reputation goes down by 2 points, and his reward is 20 silver coins. The guy is surprised, asking aloud about the robbery and theft. After that, he begins to justify himself that this is not true. In the Gods of Chaos, players can steal items without negative consequences as long as no one notices them. If they want to sell those stolen items, they must contact a certain merchant. Leaving the house, the guy blissfully exhales, finally feeling full. The eyes come across clothes that were quietly drying on a rope next to that very house. At the same moment, the guy has a good idea how to hide his belonging to tyrants. He comes closer to the clothes and deftly removes it from the same rope. Later, he uses it as a scarf, wrapping himself up, covering the tyrant's badge. Unfortunately, he understands that this is another theft, so the system notifies him again that his reputation is reduced by 1 point, and he is rewarded with another 10 silver coins. After that, he finally leaves the village, not forgetting to stock up on a little more food. Locals are running around the village, looking for a tyrant. A short, bald man shouts, directing everyone to their homes so that people check if something is missing from them. Screams are heard from one house that their sausage has been stolen. A small number of people gather in the same house and start brainstorming. One is surprised that the tyrant came to the city only for the sake of sausage, but they interrupt him, saying that in addition to meat, milk, bread, and a cloak have also disappeared. But one girl quietly says that there is a possibility that they are all wrong about the guy, because if he was a bad person, he would steal something more serious than bread. In response, the same bald man says that the guy's clothes were exactly with the emblem of tyrants, which meant that he was still a bad person. But all this dialogue is interrupted by a skinny kid. He points to the table, beckoning everyone to look at the note. In the note, the hero asked for forgiveness and promised to return everything to the people from whom he borrowed food and clothes. Those present had goosebumps, remembering the face of the young guy, because this demon was going to return to the village once again. Suddenly, the brunette sneezes, walking on the green grass. He continued on his way through the forest. Because of an unexpected sneeze, the guy assumed that it was the villagers who found his note, and now they remember him with gratitude. After that, you should praise yourself for being so smart. An ominous darkness, which mixed together with a mysterious purple color, hid the entrance to the new city, which he finally reached. Thanks to the supplies that the guy got, he was able to get to this location without incident. Compared to the brunette, the fortress seemed huge, sinister, and so impregnable. Covered with a hood, he passes through the gate. He walks across the bridge, trying not to attract too much attention to himself. But from above, on the wall of the tower, 2 figures noticed him, but there was no action on their part. The guy calmly walked through the city of chaos, looking at buildings and people. Some were well-dressed and behaved, it seems, even decently. Others were engaged in begging and drinking alcoholic beverages. The contrast of the city was clearly felt. Remembering the gaming forums, it said that this city was a forbidden zone full of evil bandits. But after examining the rest of the people, the brunette concludes that this is something more than evil bandits. To his left, the hero notices a tavern that continued to work at night. Pulling the hood tighter so that his face is definitely not visible, he decides to go to the city tavern, because this is the best place for newcomers. It is always possible to buy materials there and find any information. The brunette walks into a tavern that was half full of people. They didn't pay much attention to him, as he did to those present, just walked purposefully to the counter. In front of him stood an adult man of good, athletic build. His hair was tied up in a ponytail, glasses were on his eyes, and a mustache and beard gave him statuesque appearance, while in his hands he held a glass, which he was diligently rubbing. Finally, a man, apparently, who was the owner of the tavern, asks what his dear guest wants. Without raising his head, the guy stretches out his index and middle finger, showing the number 2. At the same moment he says that he needs 20 servings of milk and 20 servings of ration, with a long shelf life. The owner of the tavern, with a large scar on his right eye, grins, not hiding his disdain, explains that this is a bar, not a kindergarten. A guy should drink beer, like a man, in his opinion. People at a nearby table start laughing when they hear a conversation going on behind the counter. The guy does not react, only politely refuses alcohol. The owner shrugs his shoulders, saying that the guy has the right to do what he wants. The main thing is to keep in mind that the food in this institution was very expensive. The brunette is interested in how expensive she is. He explains that he defeated several wild animals on the way to Chaos City, and now he has about 50 silver coins. He also added that there are no prices on the menu, so he assumed they were normal. Remembering the original order, the man puts down the glass, saying that his request will cost 4 gold. Then he asked if the youngster could afford it. A heated discussion begins at one of the tables. A girl with dark hair and dirty purple attire says that the guy should be careful, otherwise men will crawl into the crib. To which the green-haired man sitting next to him, in whose hand there was a beer, adds that he has seen such boys before, and then I wondered if it was easy for them in the city. The third, the last blonde sitting at this table, puts forward the theory that only if there is money for the night. The brunette gets up from his seat, heading to the task board. In the tavern, laughter from those present can be heard again. Someone asks the brunette if he wants to earn extra money. Another says that where he is now is not a place for children, and he should get out of here as soon as possible. But the guy continues to ignore everyone, standing in front of the task board and choosing something suitable for him. A completely different man, who is also a visitor, says that the tasks on the board are the most dangerous in the world, and his companion adds that the boy needs to choose something easier. From behind another table, another mockery is heard. They say, "Look, the brunette is standing rooted to the spot because he is too scared." Then he laughs that some excuses from the guy will follow now. But the hero still does not pay any attention to these visitors. Indifferently removes one of the ads from the board and goes to the counter, behind which the manager was still standing, watching what was happening. The guy puts a piece of paper on the table, raises his head and looks into someone else's eyes, announces that he will complete the selected task, and asks where he can get a reward when he finishes. The man stands in a little confusion, but quickly comes to his senses. He frowns, picks up the paper and clarifies whether the guy is serious in his intentions. Is he really going to kill the Gazans? For a split second, a deathly silence hangs in the tavern, which was diluted only by the ticking of the clock. But after such a short period of time, the deafening laughter of all those present resounded into the room like never before, as if a popular comedian had just told his funniest joke. The owner leans against the bar, coming close to the young man, in the very face, as if he spits out the words that he can afford to open a tavern in this city of chaos, so he can also afford to pay for the newspaper. He just says that the guy doesn't blame him that the owner didn't warn him earlier, because Gazans are the most dangerous animal in the whole world. The guy does not react to the general reaction in any way, picks up the ad, turns around and goes to the exit. He says that everything is clear to him, and that he will return later. No one believes in the words of a young guy, so even the owner says that the kid is just bluffing. The guy understood that if he could complete the assignment, he could not only get a reward, but also beat out respect for himself. He stopped outside the door, eavesdropping on the remnants of the visitors' conversation. One of them asked the other if he had eaten Gaza meat, to which he responds with a positive answer. It was believed that Gaza meat is one of the most delicious in this world. The owner frowns, wondering if the boy will really go there. Suddenly, there is a noise in the tavern. It was the owner who hit the counter, because he only noticed that the brunette had also stolen his records. He understood that not only could he not earn more today, but also lost the order. He clearly considered this day disgusting. Gazans had the highest danger, but they paid well for this risk, as much as 500 gold coins. So the game was worth the candle. The sun was especially hot on this day, as the brunette was walking through the desert, looking for the same Gaza. Under his nose, he kept saying that he was looking for a pond, as if this was how he reminded himself of his goal every time. The information said that Gazans live in reservoirs, but there was not a single dangerous river nearby, which confused the young guy. He didn't understand where to move to stumble upon that monster. Out of desperation, he falls on solid ground, wanting to spend at least a little time on rest. He walked for so long that he managed to get hungry. He genuinely hated this game for such a plausible hunger. Perspiration broke out on his forehead. He really had time to be exhausted during this time. After looking around, the brunette notices that there is a dense forest in the northwest, so you can go there to rest and look around in search of Gaza. Along the way, the guy takes out a sausage and starts eating it, restoring his hunger and strength. Finishing his milk, he blissfully exhales, realizing how good it is not to feel hungry. Now he is full of energy and ready to move on. The brunette is already getting up from his seat, and is ready to go forward as strange sounds reach him. He is surprised, frowns and warily looks around. There are no creatures here, so why did he feel movement around? The body tensed, and the brunette began to wait for something to happen. At the same second, the earth breaks apart next to him. The guy barely manages to jump away without falling into the trap, understands how powerful the blow from the outside was, and his hand immediately flashes a sword, which recently had to be used too often. He even rejoices that the prey itself came into his hands, because he saved him from having to continue looking for a reservoir. Two monsters appear in front of the brunette, small in size, which resembled black worms with red eyes. They looked small and harmless, which confused the hero. Is it really because of them that such a rift occurred? But after that, the brunette tries to recover quickly, driving away thoughts. He takes a breath, as the same black worm immediately slips out from under that very fault of the earth, gigantic and long in size. Only now he also has sharp paws that seem to be able to pierce anything with one touch. An icon with a little information appeared above the monster. It was the Gazets of the 40th LVL. The guy greets him, rejoicing that he has finally found him, only now he wonders why it is here and not in the pond, as was originally given by the information. But the monster didn't really want to conduct any dialogue, so he immediately rushed into battle. He opened his mouth, which had at least 100 teeth arranged in a circle. There was a piercing scream deafening all living things around, and only he could strike without taking damage in return. Everything seemed to be going very well and easily. The guy stayed only for a couple of seconds, thinking about the next move, which the Gazans took advantage of, attacking with one of their paws. The brunette does not have time to dodge, taking the blow and falling to the ground, hits, and flies off a little further away. For a certain amount of time, the guy hangs in his thoughts, realizing that his blows against the Gaza are weak, but he has increased the number of his attributes. After that, the brunette rises and looks at the standard of living of the monster, which was almost completely filled, starting the fight again. The hero admits that the Gazans are actually something, but warns that in this battle the monster will still fall before him. To which the monster, as if understanding what the guy is talking about, gets angry and starts screaming again, attacking the young man. The brunette decides not to dodge, intercepts the sword, taking it more conveniently, and goes straight to the attack. They both fly up to the sky, starting to fight. The guy, being very resourceful, manages, after doing a couple of somersaults, to be on the head of the Gaza, which was his weak point. With the last word, about the wish of death, the guy hits the monster's weak point with the sword. Because of this, he automatically stops fighting, turning out to be the winner. A final heart-rending howl is heard from the monster, and again, the already familiar notification about the task, called Hunting Gazets, which has now been completed. The brunette was standing next to the newspaper, examining the monster. Coming closer, he picks up the object Gaza horn. The quality of this item was epic, and the item was of the materials type. He also received the Gaza scale armor. The level of the item was 25th. The type to which it belonged was light armor. The quality was rare. The protection was 125. Additional attributes were strength, increased by 5, endurance, which also increased by 5, and agility, which increased by 10. The addition to the item's characteristics was that the armor was shockproof, and the description said that the armor absorbs 10% of the damage inflicted. The guy holding the armor and horn in his hands is surprised that he was able to get such valuable items after this battle. The brunette droops while looking for data about himself in the settings, because he can't use the armor since the guy was only at the 13th level, while the armor could only be used from the 25th. But, as it turned out, the rewards for killing elite monsters are really generous, because he got 7 levels at a time. So now he was on the 20th level. The brunette notices that the tyrant's profession is not so useless, at least it is good for cleaning monsters. But at the same time, the hero does not want to be hunted forever. He still wanted to return to the main city, and be on the good side. After going around the newspaper, he began to wonder what to do with this huge thing. Since the hero's skill was already in cooldown, he could not transfer it due to its huge size. Another idea came to mind. Perhaps it would be possible to transfer 35 points in strength to cope with this burden. Grabbing the Gaza by the tail, the guy starts pulling it. The brunette's face turns red, and sweat appears on his forehead. Apparently, this was not the best option. Without his abilities, he still won't be able to steal the gas, no matter how hard he tries. The guy sits down on the ground, trying to catch his breath from such an unaffordable burden. He announces that he is giving up, and will not try to carry it away anymore. The idea came to mind to leave it here. Hardly anyone would want to steal it. At the very least, it is unlikely that anyone will be able to drag him away. After all, the Gaza is very heavy. Eventually, he got up and decided to head to the city to collect his promised reward. Here he goes again to the very tavern he was in quite recently. It's enough to sit down in front of the owner, leans his head on his hand, smiles and reports that he has already killed guests. After hearing such a strong statement, all those present forget about what they were talking about and pay attention to the guy and the owner of the tavern, waiting for further dialogue between these two. A pink-haired girl turns to her friend, asking what the boy said. Did he really kill the Gazans? The blue-haired man turns to the brunette, saying that he should not fool around. This tavern is still not for him, even if the guy comes up with such tall tales. A man who has already seen this guy last time in a tavern also joins the dialogue. He asks if it's the guy from yesterday, to which the second guest replies that he also remembers the guy, because he stole the order for the murder of the Gaza yesterday. Suddenly, the tavern was filled with the laughter of visitors. After all, this skinny child could not have killed a Gaza. A man who remembered yesterday's guest approaches the brunette, and throws his hand on his shoulder, makes a nasty face and says that he did not think that the guy would dare to return. He was completely sure that the hero was just wandering around the street, doing nothing, so he decided to make this assumption to his face. After that, he added that the guy had been gathering courage all day to tell about the murder of the Gaza with such an unperturbed face. The brunette was clearly not pleased with the company of this garbage, But he did not come into conflict with him, did not want to waste his strength on such a person. The man begins to laugh loudly, disgustingly, showing the remains of his teeth. He calls the guy a clown because he thinks the brunette is bluffing, coming up with such a miserable lie. After that, pointing his finger at the hero, he continues to laugh. But there was no reaction in response. The guy did not react to attempts to get him out of himself. The brunette looks up at the owner and asks if he can get his reward now. The man, realizing that he has just been ignored, bends over the guy, showing all his dissatisfaction. He is outraged, saying that the guy must have gone crazy if he dares to ignore him, then asks again if the guy really thinks he killed the newspaper. But he is stopped by the owner of the tavern, frowning, telling Henry that he would take care of the guy himself because this tavern belonged to him. The same Henry spits to the side, clucks discontentedly, turns around and walks away from the counter. Apparently, he was offended by the words of the owner, who did not let him mock the kid. The man behind the counter asks a very logical question. Where was the body of the Gaza since the guy was able to overcome him? After that, the owner explains that you can cook the most delicious dishes from meat. He paid only to eat Gaza, and now he refuses to pay if he can't get his meat. At the same moment, the owner begins to tremble with anger, which overwhelmed him at the sight of this guy, to which the brunette spreads his hands to the sides and says that the owner himself knows how big the Gazets are. The guy just won't be able to bring it himself. He explains that the monster's body is located outside the city. Then he adds that he has proof with him that he really defeated him. Slamming his hand on the table interrupts the guy. The owner makes him stop talking this nonsense. He threatens him that if the guy does not stop, then he may regret that he did not listen to him earlier. The man towers over the brunette, pressing on him with his dimensions. Again, the neighboring tables begin to whisper among themselves. The red-haired man says that if Cars, the owner of the establishment, is furious, then the boy is in trouble. The guy with blue hair, who is sitting at the same table with the redhead, adds that it doesn't matter what happens, it's just worth looking at the hero's self-confidence. Was he really going to blackmail Cars? Then he turns to the owner of the tavern, saying that it is in his favor. He will be able to get rid of the nuisance and save 200 coins. Someone adds that there is a reward of 100 gold for the robber Cars, and if he gets angry, no one can stop him. Another adds that it's not too late to get out of the tavern if the guy values his life. Someone was even surprised at how self-confident the guy was, since he went so far. From all these conversations, the brunette was tired enough because the truth was on his side. Cars, standing in front of the youngster, slowly takes off his glasses, as if giving a little more time for the boy to change his mind. But the brunette is still sitting in front of him. The owner says that the hero has been a fool for too long, and he got tired of it, so Cars decided to explain everything to him directly with the help of his power. The guy rolls his eyes because he was extremely annoyed. I didn't even have the strength to continue this conversation. He again explains that he had just killed a Gaza, and his body was outside the city. The brunette even offered to take the owner there, and only he can decide whether he wants to go there or not. But as for his reward, he didn't want to leave that question open. The young man rises from the heated place and stands in front of Cars, looks menacingly up from the bottom, declares that he must give him an honestly earned reward. The man looks back at him defiantly. His teeth were clenched. He did not believe a single word of the youngster, so he was also annoyed by this situation. But unexpectedly for the brunette, the man raises his eyebrows, expressing his surprise. He begins to laugh loudly, drawing the attention of everyone present to him. He asks if everyone heard what the guy just said. He jumps over the counter in a matter of seconds. His eyes are burning with anger. There was a feeling that his anger, and so well-built body, became many times stronger and larger. Cars warns that it was just a threat from the guy, so without hesitating a minute, he swings at him, threatening his life. But there is not a drop of fear on the brunette's face, just a slight smile, because he was confident of his victory in this small upcoming struggle. Someone else's fist flew past the guy's face. The young man himself just managed to dodge him, because his speed was clearly greater than that of the owner. Cars, with an evil face, turns back to the guy, clenches his hand into a fist again, and says that the brunette is only a little faster than a monkey. After that, he calls him a weakling and turns into a beast again, turning into a kind of monster in human form. He declares with full confidence that the guy will not be able to dodge the second blow. With his left hand, the guy pulls his sword out of the scabbard, stands in a pose and intercepts the sword in his right hand, says that if he does not teach the man a lesson, then he will not give him a reward, so he had no other choice. I should have agreed to this fight. The brunette again dodges the hand, adding that he will not beat the man to death, because in that case no one will pay him. Visitors are revived again, expecting an epic fight. Someone notices that a guy seems cool even when he's dying. Another says that the guy can't really be sure that he has the strength to kill the Gazan. And the toothless man again adds fuel to the fire, telling Cars to crush this arrogant guy. The third blow also did not have time to fall on the brunette's face. The hand stopped at the very nose. Cars lowers his head, noticing that his t-shirt is torn and a deep wound remains on his body. As it turned out, no one had time to notice the speed of the young man who so deftly managed to strike with his sword. Cars howls in pain, clutching at his wound, closing it to stop the bleeding a little. The guy said he wouldn't kill the owner of the tavern, but he didn't mind sending the man to the hospital for a few days. And then the question follows, does the man want to continue the fight? The guy seems to give him a chance to mix up. After that, without waiting for an answer, the brunette begins to wield a sword, leaving wounds on someone else's body. Cars notices that the child is not timid, he was very strong. A toothless man begins to mock the owner of the tavern, saying that the famous outlaw, as he was called, can't even defeat a nobody. The second, a blue-haired guy, adds that Cars' powers are no longer the same. And the girl with pink hair casually says that outlaw, he is not the same as he was before. It was as if they were all adding oil to this already hot fire. Cars gets angry, forcing those present to close their mouths, after which he warns them to be careful. In his head, he understands that he cannot afford to lose face here. As soon as he shows his weakness to the others, he will simply be devoured by these hungry wolves. After all, there is a reward of 100 gold coins for the head of the tavern owner. In his head, he thinks out a plan for his further actions. First, the left fist. He moves straight into someone else's chest. Only the guy doesn't seem to feel the blow. He stands motionless and smiles. The man is surprised that the brunette did not shy away. Health points are displayed above the guy's head, which did not seem to have moved at all. Cars arrives in shock, because despite the fact that he used only 30% of his strength in this blow, the guy did not feel anything at all. At the same moment, it seems, from despair, Cars howls again, as if he is ready to cry like a little child, clicks, and strikes again with his huge fist. The unperturbed guy stands and just looks at these childish attempts to harm his body. The air around him dissipates due to the attack speed, combing his hair back. The brunette grins, asking what kind of tickles they were. He understood that now that his attributes had increased 33 times, which was difficult for even a level 100 player to achieve, he was almost invincible. The impact of the cars was so strong that the airflow went outside the tavern, demolishing everything in the street. It was as if a pogrom had taken place in the building itself, as if he was trying to find something here, so he turned everything upside down. The people who were in the tavern were already sitting on the floor, but they still continued to watch the clash of these two. Everyone's attention was focused on the kid's health points. Most likely, a full power Cars strike will take away 2% of health, although perhaps even only 1%. The owner understands that all his attempts are in vain, so he falls to the floor, crawling away from the young guy. Cars begs him not to come close, because he was already afraid for his life, and the brunette just plays, coming closer and closer to Cars, as if teasing. The guy says he's afraid of losing control of his power and accidentally killing him. He was amused to watch the changes in the face of Cars and the visitors. At first everyone laughed at him, and now it turns out they are very scared. The brunette raises his sword to the sky, looks at the man with contempt, and says that next time he will hit him with a sword. People, starting to come to their senses, get up from the floor, but still continue, as if fascinated, to watch this picture. A toothless man still wanted to believe that this guy didn't kill Gaza. Comparing the dimensions of the monster and the youngster himself, it was hard to believe it even after he demonstrated his power. Cars was still trying to crawl away from this insanely strong guy who was scaring him. The brunette ponders his next plan of action. One of the options was to deprive Cars of 10% of his health with a sword until he agreed to pay. After that, he takes the sword aside and finishes off the owner with his own words, offering to kill him immediately. The man gets scared, starting to shout that he should pay, so long as the guy doesn't touch him. The brown-eyed brunette's gaze softens and he agrees, hiding his sword back in its sheath. At first he was going to take him to the hospital, but now he has saved himself from this problem. The brunette squats down next to Cars, asking where his reward is. The owner of the tavern jumps up, asking to give him a couple of minutes to bring everything. Literally a minute later, a mountain of gold coins was laid out on the counter, and Cars was standing in front of her, smiling sweetly. The guy, not trusting this slippery type, starts counting everything. Cars gives him the last coins he owes the brunette, saying that this is all he has. Then he gets up, folding his hands, and asks if he counted everything correctly. The guy starts from afar, announces how many coins he originally had, or rather it is 53 silver and 84 copper. Accordingly, he was still 20 short. Cars looks at the guy with horror, then runs behind the counter, saying that he will bring everything right away. But as soon as he opens the cabinet, in which all the coins were, he realizes that there is not a penny left. He sits down on the floor and looks anxiously at the ceiling. He begins to tremble slightly. A guy stands up in front of him and leans on the counter, asks if Cars remembers what the guy originally asked for when he first came here. But the owner drooped even more, because he didn't remember anything from what the guy ordered then. He is ready to grab his head and howl in despair. Noticing this, the guy just calmly says again that he ordered 20 servings of milk and 20 servings of rations with a long shelf life. The joyful Cars jumps up from his seat and begins to wave his head in agreement, and asks to wait just a moment so that he brings everything right away. He takes off and runs for food, knocking people off their feet. From the tense atmosphere, the girl even broke out in sweat. She could not believe her eyes. He asks again who this guy is, because he just scared Cars to death. The blue-haired man, who previously laughed at the brunette, says that Cars cannot be called weak, but he is not comparable to that guy. He just has to hope that the hero will not pursue them all after their ridicule. Satisfied, Cars hurries back to the main building with 2 stuffed bags. Then he puts them on the table in front of the brunette. With the help of the game, the guy makes sure that in both bags the food he needed is in the exact amount. He puts his hand on one of the bags and praises Cars while he nods contentedly, accepting the kindness. The brunette takes the bags, walking away. He left everyone present to ponder what had just happened. Some calmly exhaled and were glad that the guy finally left, but it wasn't there. The dark crown reappears, which forgot to tell where it was possible to pick up the newspaper. Having explained the way, the door closes behind him, now forever. Cars exhales, hoping that this time the guy is really gone. But the doors to the tavern open again with a characteristic creak, and everyone immediately jumps on pins and needles, expecting to see a brunette. A female voice immediately calms them down, and she asks why everyone froze, and horror is painted on the faces of those present. A white-haired girl, with bright pink eyes, and dressed in a white suit with black details, is surprised that they have already closed, somehow too early for this institution. The toothless man happily approaches the girl, whose name was Vicky. She says that she scared them a lot, and then asks why she came here at all. The other guy exhaled easily, because he thought it was the boy who had staged a show here a couple of minutes ago. Examining the surrounding people, the girl asks what is the matter. She had only come to the tavern to deliver the latest information about the rewards. And then she tells the main news. It turns out that for a weak-looking boy, a reward of 203 coins has been appointed. After that, she sighed sadly, because in fact she would like to meet him to earn money. The owner of the tavern himself, ignoring all the information, thinks about moving out of here and opening a store in another place to live a quiet life. This whole situation has shocked him too much. A toothless man asks the girl what she just said. Thoughts about the same guy came to my head, but for some reason I didn't want to believe it. How likely is it that they have met such a dangerous villain? The white-haired woman didn't really want to repeat it. It was evident in her facial expressions, but she still repeats that she would have been really lucky if she had stumbled upon him. Apparently, she wanted to try her luck and make some money on this guy. The man who conducted the dialogue with her shakes his head negatively, telling her to repeat what she said even earlier. The girl thought for a moment, scratched her head, closed her eyes and exhaled heavily. She was talking about a frail-looking boy who was being offered 203 coins. Cars takes off his glasses and asks if she's talking about the guy who wears a black raincoat. The girl, already more interested, nods her head quickly, saying that it is him she means. Then he shows a photo and asks if the people from the tavern know him. Cars frowned for a moment. The reward of 203 coins, which is twice as much as it was assigned for him. It was not at all surprising that the owner did not have a chance to win. Pink-eyed, blinks a couple of times, showing off her white eyelashes, then tilts her head to the side. It looks like she guessed that they had already met. She puts her hand on the shoulder of a toothless man in a friendly way, and asks if they want to cooperate and earn some good money. She just needed information about his whereabouts. In return, she would have given 10% of the promised reward for his capture, removing someone else's hand from his shoulder. The man shakes his head negatively, saying that he does not want to get involved in this. Just in case, he still warned the girl about what Cars had just received from a brunette, so this guy is not as weak as it seems at first glance. Vicky leans against the counter, looking at Cars, and seems to be laughing at him, asking if it's true. Cars, displeased, puts Henry in his place, asking him to watch his tongue. The girl looked the owner of the tavern from head to toe. If you do not take into account the wound on his chest, then he looked pretty good, because the limbs were in place. This meant that the guy was not going to kill Cars, which means that at least some kind of dialogue could be conducted with him. During her reflections, the girl, as usual, liked to do this, sit on the counter. Of course, this is noticed by Cars, who discontentedly folds his arms on his chest. Turns to the girl, again reminding her not to sit on the counter. He repeated it to her every time, and every time she did not listen to him. But Vicky ignores him this time, throws her leg up a tree, saying that everything that was happening seemed very curious to her. She wants to try her luck again, so now she asks Cars if he knows where the guy is. The pink-haired girl straightens up and sighs heavily because of Vicky's persistence. She had time to assume that they were seeing Vicky for the last time, and the blue-haired one connects to her, agreeing with her thought. offers to have a drink later for the health of the white-haired. Wandering through the city of chaos, the guy exhales heavily. He had been wandering for half a day, but he had not stumbled upon the forges. Did they really not exist in this city at all? After that, the idea came to his mind that he had money and he could pay off the order for himself. But for this he had to return to the mayor's office of the main city. But the soldiers could try to arrest him again, which stopped the guy from carrying out his plan. After all, the villain ability was quite short-lived. He could not be sure that he would be able to get out of the city besieged by professional soldiers. That's why he needed to prepare more seriously. The guy rediscovers information about the Gaza horn. It was an ideal material for weapons, so to begin with, the brunette needed to figure out exactly how to use the Gaza horn to create weapons. From the many thoughts that so quickly visit the head of the brunette, he was led out by a young man who leaned against a stone wall with his back. The stranger asked if the brunette was looking for something in this city. The guy is surprised, pointing a finger at himself, clarifies whether he was addressed. But without waiting for an answer, he says that he is looking for a forge, and then he tries to find out about the direction in which he should move to get to the place he needs. The stranger begins to stretch his shoulders, rejoicing as if the brunette had come to the right place. Although, according to the green-eyed stranger, it was. He said that although he didn't look like it, he was the best blacksmith in Chaos City. The brunette examines the stranger, showing with all his appearance that he does not trust him. His neat clothes of dark green tones, with classic gray trousers, did not look at all like what a blacksmith could wear. Noticing the look full of suspicion that was riveted on the green-eyed man, he begins to justify himself, says that it is important for him to maintain his image, and he wears a robe only when he is busy with work. It seemed pretty reasonable to him. The brunette thinks for a couple of seconds and then agrees with the words of a stranger. Unexpectedly for the hero, the green-eyed man grabs his hand and pulls him along, hiding from human eyes. On the way, he asks what exactly the brunette needs to repair equipment or forge a new weapon. That's what's bothering the guy. Usually blacksmiths try to sell their goods first, but in any case, the villain was no longer in cooldown, so the brunette was ready for anything. Left alone, the green-eyed man turns to the brunette. The hero says that he needs a new weapon. The stranger listens attentively to him, after which he presses his hands to himself and asks if the guy has materials with him to create a new weapon. The brunette pulls out a Gaza horn from the inventory, showing it to a new stranger. After that, he expresses his fears that the green-eyed young man may not be able to cope with such material and will simply spoil it. The stranger's hands begin to shake, and he changes his face as if he saw an incredible prey. His eyes instantly begin to glow at the sight of such a rare material. He understands that this is the very horn of Gaza, which is so difficult to defeat. His hands reach for the materials while he promises that if the brunette gives him the horn, then the green-eyed one will make the best weapon for him. But their entire secret conversation is interrupted by a girl who suddenly appeared in a dark alley. The white-haired woman warns the brunette, saying that the green-eyed one is lying. Both guys turn to the girl, not expecting to see an outsider here at all. The green-eyed man starts yelling at Vicky, saying that she is talking complete nonsense, and he is by no means a liar. She just mocks Brian, folding her arms over her chest. It was no secret to anyone that a bad reputation goes ahead of the guy himself. Then she started talking about the theft of some ruby, which, apparently, was the fault of the same Brian. He freaks out, stands up in a stance, as if preparing to fight, shouts so that the girl does not interfere with him, because it should not concern her in any way. Vicky nods her head, confirming that it didn't concern her in any way before, but now she indirectly knew the guy for whom they put up not a small reward. She warns that the green-eyed man may very much regret this contact. It could be assumed that this time the girl saved his life by warning him about a dangerous guy the government was looking for, so later the green-eyed man would have to pay for saving his skin. She confirmed all her words with just one piece of paper in her hand. A photograph of the brunette was printed on the sheet, and the price for his capture was signed at the bottom. The boy starts shouting loudly, after which he gets away, flashing his heels, fearing for his life. Finally, the white-haired woman shouts to him that the guy can pay her for saving them at their old place, which was known only to these two. The disgruntled brunette turns to the girl with bright pink eyes. Of course, he was interested in who she was, and why she was helping a criminal for whom they were paying a large sum. Vicky turns to the guy and bows, asking for forgiveness because she completely forgot to introduce herself. It was a girl who was an information merchant. The guy is surprised, as if he had never heard of such a profession before, so he asks her again. Vicky explains that she knows a lot more than most people combined in the world. It seemed like a fiction, but the girl quickly continued to talk further, that she had recently sold information about a robbery in Darim, as well as information about the sale of the city authorities of Sagos and much more. As for the reason why the girl helped the guy, it was because she had heard a lot about him lately. And if you look from the benefit side, it can become a very profitable relationship. Well, to prove the sincerity of her intentions, she offers to take the brunette to the best blacksmith, whom she knew, and she knew many. She holds out her hand to the guy, waiting for his answer. In response, the brunette shakes hands, but he warns that if the girl tries to do something against him, then their cooperation will immediately come to an end. She nods because it was fair for both sides. After that, she added that she was already expecting a new achievement. Apparently, she was overwhelmed with confidence and expectation of something new. So the two became business partners and went together to the blacksmith shop, which was what Vicky was talking about. Walking slightly behind the white-haired girl, the guy clarifies whether they are exactly going in the right direction. But the girl did not doubt herself at all. She insistently says that they are going right and very soon they will reach the next city, which was already called Verga. The guy, who had already managed to get a little tired, just said that the city was really very far away. But he didn't want to complain and seem weak, but it really tired him. In order to dilute the silence that was uncomfortably pressing on the two of them, Vicky decided to ask if the guy really won the Gaza. It seems that the guy is not very interested in this conversation, so he hesitates before answering this question. But then he raises his eyes and answers in the affirmative, adding that it was not at all difficult for him. Vicky raised her eyebrows in surprise, making sure that the guy who killed the Gazans was really standing in front of her. Her plan was to first gain trust so that her whole idea would go smoothly. Stopping on the slope, from which the gates to Verga were already visible, Vicky starts pointing at the fortress, explains that the blacksmith they are looking for is a little old, but is still a master of his craft, and is considered the best blacksmith in the world. She spoke as if she was 100% sure that the guy would be satisfied with the result. Inspecting the gate, the guy says that he can't get closer due to the fact that everyone is actively hunting him, so it was quite problematic to get inside. The girl nods, understanding what the guy is leading to, but she is not a blunder. This moment was thought out by her. She nods to the guy, telling him to follow her. Vicky was going to take him through a secret passage. The place through which they walked to the city was not the most pleasant to look at. It was the sewer of the whole city. Rats, an unpleasant smell, and even a couple of people were in a similar place, which could not but surprise, but it was clearly repulsive. The brunette continued to cover his nose in order to somehow get rid of the unpleasant smell, from which even his eyes began to water. But the girl continued to walk unperturbed. She agreed that the smell was not pleasant, but the place was very safe. Vicky explained that the soldiers are not guarding this place, ignoring the authorities who give them instructions to be in such places. The girl actively talked about the fact that the sewer runs all over the city, so this way was very convenient for some people with a certain status. She talked so much that sometimes it seemed that she was leading a tour. Noticing another child huddled into a ball, the guy realizes that this place is not particularly peaceful. At last they reached the right ladder. It only remained to climb to the top, and they would finally be free. Vicky was the first to climb, warning the brunette to be careful. Even though patrolmen, as a rule, did not happen upstairs, it was not worth ruling out the possibility that they could appear at any moment. After that, she adds that the guy does not look up. Otherwise he will have to pay for the view. At this moment, the brunette was embarrassed and looked away. After all, Vicky had a very short white skirt. Finally getting out, they go to the house they need, in which the same blacksmith lived, about whom Vicky spoke earlier. The girl starts actively knocking on the door, calling Mr. Timos. While the girl was doing this, the guy decided to look around if this was another trap, but literally over his head hung a sign, meaning that there is nothing but a blacksmith shop. True, the place looked quite ordinary and inconspicuous. Is it really the best blacksmith in the world? The door in front of them slowly opens slightly, starting to creak unpleasantly. An adult man looks out of a small crack. The stranger warily asks who came, but it looked as if they had come to arrest him. The girl breaks into a smile, and happily informs her friend that it was she who came. The door opens completely, and a man stands in front of the heroes, whose hair was tousled. A careless beard and mustache were visible on his face, which, apparently, had not been shaved for a couple of days. He was dressed in an ordinary white t-shirt tucked into dark blue pants, and on top of all this was a blue haori that had no drawings on it. The man raises his eyebrows when he sees an old acquaintance, voices that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and that Vicky has become a real girl because she has managed to grow up so much. The white-haired woman turns to the hero, after which she introduces him to Mr. Timos, who was a friend of her father and also the best blacksmith. For some reason, the guy felt uncomfortable, and not knowing where to put himself, he began to scratch the back of his head, after which he awkwardly greeted, not forgetting about the rules of decency. He was surprised, looking at Timos, and this man living in such a place is the best blacksmith in the world. Then Vicky introduces the brunette to Timos. She says that in front of them is Wildfire, who is her companion, after which he explains that the brunette is in a difficult situation, but still would like to have a good weapon. The man closes his eyes, thinking deeply. After that, he gives out that if a friend needs to wait out a couple of days somewhere, then Timos can help. But what about weapons? He has not been doing this for a long time, so he wanted to refuse, but the girl did not let him do it, having managed to stop him. She says that the boy prepared a Gaza horn, so the gentleman had to think twice before giving up such valuable material. The man examines the guy, asking if he heard correctly what they were saying about the Gaza horn. To this question, Vicky begins to actively nod her head, expecting that a friend is about to agree to help. The girl comes closer, wondering if Uncle Timos just doesn't know how to work with this material, so he tries to avoid work in every possible way. The man looks away, as if not wanting to listen to the girl, but still it is being provoked, so Timos forces the girl to stop talking nonsense. After that, he said that if the guys really have such valuable material, then he is ready to take up the creation of weapons of growth. The guy screams loudly, surprised by the man's statement. Can he really create a weapon of growth? The brunette's surprise was ignored by the blacksmith, who began a new dialogue, asking if the youth really believed that he was able to create a weapon of the highest class. The hero takes the Gaza horn out of the inventory and holds it in his hands, intending to pass it to Timos. The brunette nods at the man's words, which meant that he completely trusted him. The blacksmith accepts the material, admiring the fact that in his hands is really the horn of Gaza. After all, the material is of high quality. Not every day you deal with this. A smile spreads on Timos' face. He is already many years old, and he has spent a lot of time on his work, but he could not even think that he would be lucky enough to work with such quality material again. After that, he looks up from examining the horn, looks up at the brunette and sincerely thanks for the trust. After that, he announces that he is starting his work and goes to the workshop, leaving the teenagers outside the door. Being alone, the girl was the first to start a conversation, warning the guy not to take offense at Timos because he was not a bad person. The brunette nods at the girl's words, saying that he understands this. Apparently, Timos was really good, but with his own character, a peculiar person. Remembering the words of the blacksmith, the guy turns to the girl, asking if he had already had the opportunity to work with such materials before. The girl waves her hand at her face, exhaling heavily. She grabs the brunette by the hand, leading him out of the house, asks for it because it was incredibly hot in the forge. Left alone on the street, the girl leans against the wall, exhaling air again, and then begins her story. Apparently, Timos was really different from ordinary people, and the brunette himself managed to notice this. Once a blacksmith forged a legendary weapon from the Fang of Teladurk, which was later called the Fang of Truth. The guy opens his mouth in surprise. He would never have thought in his life that Mr. Timos has such a rich past. Suddenly Vicky hears a noise, tenses up, grabs the guy by the shoulder, forcefully turns him around a dark corner, presses him against the wall, leans closer and presses her index finger to his lips, forcing him to be as quiet as possible. Two patrolmen come out from around the other corner, inspecting the surroundings and buildings. The girl begins to whisper that they are in the center of the city, so patrolmen were a frequent occurrence in these places. And since the guy was an unusual person, it would be preferable for him to sit quietly and not get caught by them. Instead of a finger on the guy's lips, there was already a hand forcing him to be silent. From such an unexpected turn of events, of course, he would like to get angry, but he could not afford it because she helps him. But she did it not only for the sake of the guy, but also for the sake of her uncle, who now needs to be as focused as possible, so it would be ideal not to bother him. After the people from the army left, the guys just sat on the steps and enjoyed the weather. Sometimes they had brief dialogues, but their idyll was interrupted by the same creaking door. Timos appeared on the doorstep, thanking the guys for waiting. He shows the weapon that he managed to create during this time. It was a dark green sword decorated with white patterns. Timos passes it to the guy, hoping that he will be pleased with his creation, which he made after such a long time. Accepting the weapon, the guy realizes that it is really a weapon of growth. The notification pop-up explains the basic parameters of the sword. It belonged to the type of one-handed sword. The quality was epic. The level depended on the level of the user. Special features, bloody tears, the right of brute force, the absorption of the top on its way justice. The sword had 3 special abilities. Blood tears. 1 kill increased the effect of blood absorption by 0.1%. Second, the right of brute force. 1 kill increases the attack power by 0.1%. And last, absorption. 1 kill increased health by 0.1%. Each of these possibilities was simply amazing. The blacksmith folds his arms over his chest and smiles smugly, asking if the guy likes his new sword. The brunette was polite, so he bows low with gratitude, saying that this is the best weapon he has ever seen. He thanked Timos, saying that he would make sure that the whole world would know about this wonderful blade. But the blacksmith laughs, stopping the guy, saying that first the brunette has to pay him 200 gold before he starts thanking him. The girl also joined this conversation, saying that she should be paid 10% of the amount, that is, 20 gold, since she provided information about the forge, and then she began to list the entire list for which she should be paid. Because she saved him from a fraudster, helped with a workaround to avoid losses, from meeting with patrol officers. The guy has a feeling that he was just cheated. He was in a little shock from the unexpected demands. But then he scratches his head, explaining that he does not have so many coins. But Vicky is not angry, just saying that she will put it down to the guy's account. She wasn't going to terrorize him with this. She had already talked about cooperating with her. Her plan was this: she would find good assignments, and after completing them and receiving a reward, the brunette would repay her debt. After that, she adds that the payment for information on behalf will be at the standard rate. She opens a large map, telling that an underwater exhibition is currently taking place in the port of Rio, and that they could visit there together for goods. There was also an order in Suno, where an old man wants to hire an assassin to deal with his enemies. And there was also a task in Rivedina, walking through the woods behind the girl. The guy gets a little lost from the tasks that Vicky voiced. All the assignments concerned only illegal activities, and the brunette did not like it. The girl does not turn to a new acquaintance, shrugs her shoulders, and explains to a small child that the guy is a villain, for whose head a reward of 200 gold was announced. There was simply no other kind of earnings for him. The brunette throws his head back, combing his hair, exhales heavily and whines that he did not choose this path. The hero asks to find him something where he would not break the law. Vicky gets lost thinking about the fact that one of the best criminals does not want to commit a crime. It sounded obviously strange, but she agreed to accept it, starting to look for something suitable among her papers. A white sheet with a gold border falls into her hands. It was a mercenary-related assignment. She passes the paper to the guy, offering him to look. The brunette agrees that this is already better than the previous tasks, and offers to discuss the order in more detail. Sagos and Halma are now on the verge of war. Both sides are recruiting people who are ready to fight and risk their lives. The parties are determined to destroy each other. Therefore, they would welcome anyone who is willing to fight on their side. Vicky explained that if the brunette shows himself well, then Sagos can save him from a bad reputation. The brunette was clearly inspired by this idea. He can kill two birds with one stone. He will be able to earn some money and work for his reputation. The guy loudly says that he accepts this order, starting to rejoice inside himself. Vicky bows her head and asks if the guy is happy that he can kill more people, to which the guy, as if scalded, loudly replies that the girl did not understand everything correctly.